March 15, 1943, Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo, Commander Akira Tanaka pressed his trembling fingers against the decoded intercept as dawn light filtered through the blackout curtains of the communications center. Chill. The message from Lieutenant Commander Sato aboard the destroyer Hayakaze contained intelligence that shattered 3 years of carefully constructed strategic assumptions. American convoy operations in the Pacific weren't just recovering from Pearl Harbor losses, they were expanding at rates that defied mathematical possibility. Tanaka would later document this moment in his classified post-war memoir, The Numbers That Broke Our Spirit, published privately in Japan in 1958. One of the most detailed accounts of how Japanese naval intelligence slowly comprehended the true scale of American industrial mobilization. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The intercept room at Imperial Navy Headquarters occupied the entire third floor of the concrete bunker complex beneath central Tokyo. Steel filing cabinets lined every wall, containing thousands of decoded American transmissions that painted an increasingly impossible picture. Radio operators worked in 12-hour shifts, their headphones crackling with American convoy chatter that revealed shipping schedules across the Pacific. Commander Tanaka supervised a team of 30 analysts whose job was to track American merchant vessel movements and predict supply deliveries to forward bases. What they discovered in the spring of 1943 contradicted every assumption Japanese war planners had made about American industrial capacity. The intercepts weren't describing recovery from early war losses, they documented expansion that seemed to mock the concept of wartime skill. American shipyards weren't just replacing vessels sunk by Japanese submarines, they were launching new merchant ships faster than the combined fleet could sink them, even if every torpedo found its target. Lieutenant Yamamoto, Tanaka's senior analyst whose university mathematics background made him invaluable for statistical projections, approached with a folder of calculations that would haunt Japanese strategic planning for the remainder of the war. His hands shook as he presented figures that challenged everything they understood about industrial warfare. American shipyards had launched 746 merchant vessels in 1942. Standard Japanese intelligence estimates suggested peak American production might reach 900 ships annually by 1944, assuming total economic mobilization. The intercepted communications revealed actual American production targets that seemed like propaganda designed to demoralize enemy analysts. The Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, operating techniques unknown to Japanese industry, planned to launch one Liberty ship every 4 days throughout 1943. Not 4 days to complete construction, but 4 days from keel. Not 4 days to complete construction, but 4 days from keel laying to ocean trials. Traditional Japanese shipbuilding required 18 months minimum for comparable vessels. The mathematics suggested Americans possessed construction methods that transcended known engineering limitations. Yamamoto's calculations, preserved in Japanese naval archives, opened in 1995, demonstrated the strategic implications with terrifying clarity. If American intercepts represented actual capabilities rather than deception operations, Japanese submarine warfare faced impossible odds. The combined fleet would need to sink 3 American merchant vessels daily just to prevent net growth in Pacific convoy capacity. Current submarine operations achieve 12 kills monthly on optimal patrol cycles. The numbers indicated strategic defeat through simple arithmetic, regardless of tactical brilliance or fighting spirit. The morning briefing on March 16 brought additional intelligence that deepened the analytical crisis. Submarine Commander Hashimoto, recently returned from Pacific patrol operations, reported observations that contradicted Japanese assumptions about American convoy vulnerability. His submarine I-27 had tracked American supply convoys between San Francisco and Hawaii for 6 weeks, documenting escort patterns and cargo capacity that revealed logistics operations on an unimaginable scale. American convoys weren't desperate supply runs protecting critical materials, they moved with the casual efficiency of peacetime commercial shipping, despite operating in declared emissions. Escort destroyers maintained loose formations, suggesting confidence in submarine detection capabilities. Merchant vessels displayed running lights at night, violating every principle of wartime operational security. Air patrols covered convoy routes with redundant coverage, implying aircraft availability that exceeded Japanese estimates of total American military production. The cargo documentation recovered from intercepts challenged Japanese understanding of American production priorities. Convoys carried not just ammunition and fuel, but construction equipment, concrete mixers, refrigeration units, medical supplies, recreational materials, and consumer goods for forward bases. The diversity suggested American industry could simultaneously support military operations while maintaining civilian production levels that Japanese factories abandoned in 1941. Harbor intelligence from reconnaissance flights over Pearl Harbor documented reconstruction progress that defied damage assessment predictions. Japanese naval aviation had delivered what intelligence estimates described as crippling damage to American Pacific Fleet capabilities. Battleship Row had burned for days, fuel storage facilities had exploded spectacularly, dry dock facilities suffered direct hits that should have prevented major repairs for years. 6 months after the attack, aerial reconnaissance revealed not just repairs but expansion beyond pre-war capacity. New dry docks accommodated larger vessels, fuel storage capacity exceeded original installations, ship repair facilities operated continuously, with work lights visible throughout night observation flights. The base that Japanese planning assumed would require 2 years for basic functionality had become a logistics hub surpassing pre-war operations within months. The intelligence reports flowing into Tanaka's analysis section painted a picture of American material abundance that seemed designed to break Japanese morale. Submarine reconnaissance of American West Coast ports revealed cargo handling operations that dwarfed Japanese commercial facilities even during peacetime prosperity. The Port of Los Angeles processed more tonnage weekly than Tokyo Bay handled monthly before the war. Cargo cranes operated continuously. Storage warehouses covered acres of waterfront property. Railroad terminals stretched beyond observation range. American railroad logistics particularly mystified Japanese analysts trained in resource conservation principles. Intelligence reports documented American supply trains carrying single commodity types across continental distances. Entire trains dedicated to hauling steel beams from Pennsylvania mills to California shipyards. Complete trainloads of wheat moving from Kansas farms to Pacific ports. The inefficiency of dedicated cargo movements suggested resource abundance that allowed waste Japanese logistics couldn't contemplate. Communications intercepts revealed American military supply priorities that contradicted Japanese assumptions about wartime necessity. American forward bases requested materials that seemed like luxuries during total war mobilization, recreation equipment for off-duty personnel, fresh food storage facilities, medical supplies exceeding combat casualty requirements. Construction materials for permanent buildings rather than temporary fortifications. The requisitions suggested American commanders planned for extended occupations rather than desperate defensive operations. The spring 1943 intelligence estimates compiled by Tanaka's section classified documents only released in Japanese archives during the 1990s, contained projections that Japanese high command initially dismissed as analytical errors. American industrial production appeared to be accelerating rather than reaching sustainable wartime levels. Steel production exceeded peacetime output by 40% while simultaneously supporting military expansion. Aluminum production, critical for aircraft manufacturing, had tripled since Pearl Harbor while maintaining civilian applications. Aircraft production numbers from intercepted communications seemed particularly impossible to Japanese analysts familiar with Zero fighter manufacturing limitations. American factories claimed monthly production targets that exceeded annual Japanese aircraft output across all manufacturers. The Willow Run plant in Michigan, according to intelligence reports, planned to manufacture one B-24 bomber every hour by late 1943. Japanese aircraft production required months per comparable heavy bomber, assuming optimal material availability and experienced workforce deployment. The workforce implications of American production claims puzzled Japanese economists studying intercepted labor statistics. American industries reported employment levels that should have created severe civilian shortages, yet consumer goods remained available in American markets monitored through neutral nation intelligence. Women entered manufacturing roles previously reserved for skilled male workers, yet productivity increased rather than declined. Racial minorities participated in defense production, contradicting Japanese propaganda about American social weaknesses. Training programs for industrial workers, documented in intercepted communications, revealed American approaches to skill development that challenged Japanese assumptions about manufacturing expertise. Traditional Japanese methods required years of apprenticeship for precision manufacturing work. American programs claimed to train aircraft assembly workers in weeks, welders in months, and complex machinery operators in minimal time periods.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Such rapid skill development seemed impossible without sacrificing quality, yet product testing reports suggested American equipment reliability exceeded Japanese standards. By April 1943, the accumulated intelligence forced Japanese naval planning to confront strategic realities that undermined the entire Pacific War concept. America wasn't struggling to replace Pearl Harbor losses while maintaining European commitments. American industry was simultaneously expanding Pacific operations, supporting Atlantic convoy battles, and preparing for European invasion operations while maintaining domestic consumption levels that Japanese civilians hadn't experienced during peacetime prosperity. The logistics implications terrified Japanese strategists more than tactical defeats. Every Japanese advance required months of careful supply accumulation. Fuel for naval operations was calculated per gallon. Ammunition production barely met current consumption rates. Food supplies for forward garrisons required constant resupply from shrinking domestic resources. American forces operated with supply abundance that allowed operational flexibility impossible under Japanese logistics constraints. Intelligence reports described American forward bases with supply stockpiles exceeding Japanese strategic reserves. Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, according to reconnaissance, maintained fuel supplies sufficient for weeks of continuous air operations. American construction battalions, the famous Seabees, built airfields in weeks using equipment and materials that would require months to accumulate under Japanese logistics systems. The speed of American base construction allowed tactical mobility that Japanese forces couldn't match. The intercepted communications revealed American military culture that mystified Japanese officers trained in resource conservation and sacrifice. American units requisitioned spare parts beyond immediate needs, creating redundant supply stockpiles that Japanese logistics considered wasteful. Maintenance procedures replaced components based on operating hours rather than actual wear, discarding parts that Japanese technicians would repair and reuse multiple times. The casual waste of materials suggested resource abundance beyond Japanese comprehension. Food supplies for American forces particularly amazed Japanese intelligence analysts familiar with military ration limitations. American military menus included fresh meat daily, dairy products, fruits and vegetables, beverages beyond water and basic tea. Thanksgiving 1942 menus intercepted from Pacific bases described meals that exceeded Japanese peacetime civilian standards. The calories per soldier exceeded Japanese military rations by substantial margins, yet represented standard rather than exceptional provisioning. Medical supplies for American forces revealed logistics priorities that seemed impossibly generous to Japanese military medicine. American field hospitals carried pharmaceutical inventories that exceeded major Japanese civilian hospitals. Surgical equipment was replaced rather than sterilized and reused. Blood plasma was available for routine injuries rather than reserved for critical cases. Dental care was provided as preventive rather than emergency treatment. The medical support structure suggested American commanders valued individual soldier welfare over resource conservation. Communications security analysis revealed American operational confidence that puzzled Japanese intelligence specialists. American radio transmissions often used minimal encryption for routine logistics communications, suggesting confidence in code security or indifference to intelligence leakage. Japanese communications required maximum security protocols for basic operational messages. American casual approach to information security either demonstrated technological superiority in cryptography or reflected resource abundance that made intelligence leakage acceptable. The spring 1943 analysis reports compiled by Commander Tanaka's intelligence section contained strategic assessments that Japanese naval leadership struggled to accept. American logistics capabilities weren't approaching sustainable wartime limits, they were accelerating beyond Japanese ability to comprehend or counter. Every tactical success against American forces would be overwhelmed by strategic resource advantages that rendered individual battles irrelevant to war outcomes. Tanaka's personal notes, discovered in family archives after his death in 1987, documented his growing understanding that Japan faced an enemy whose industrial capacity transcended traditional military concepts. America wasn't fighting a war of survival requiring maximum sacrifice and careful resource management. America was conducting industrial operations that happened to involve military applications, supported by economic foundations that could sustain multiple global conflicts simultaneously while improving domestic living standards. The intelligence estimates for summer 1943 operations, classified documents that remained secret until the 1990s, projected American Pacific capabilities that seemed designed to demoralize Japanese strategic planning. American convoy capacity would triple by year-end. Forward base construction would create unsinkable aircraft carrier networks across the Pacific. Supply stockpiles would enable sustained offensive operations without vulnerable logistics lines. Industrial production would support European invasion operations while expanding Pacific theater capabilities. The mathematics of American logistics supremacy became unavoidable by mid-1943. Japanese strategic planning based on resource limitation principles couldn't compete with American abundance doctrines. Every Japanese tactical innovation would be countered by American material advantages that eliminated resource constraints from strategic calculations. The war had become a contest between Japanese efficiency and American capacity, with capacity proving decisive regardless of tactical brilliance or cultural dedication. Intelligence reports from summer 1943 documented American logistics operations that seemed to mock Japanese resource conservation efforts. American airbases in the Pacific discarded aviation fuel rather than storing it when shipments exceeded consumption rates. Construction materials were abandoned at completed project sites rather than transported to new locations. Spare parts inventories exceeded immediate needs by margins that Japanese logistics considered criminally wasteful. The casual disposal of military resources suggested economic foundations beyond Japanese comprehension. The comparative analysis charts prepared by Lieutenant Yamamoto, mathematical documents preserved in Japanese naval archives, demonstrated the impossibility of Japanese strategic success through resource mathematics alone. American steel production exceeded total Japanese industrial output across all categories. American shipbuilding capacity could replace the entire Japanese merchant marine every 6 months. American aircraft production would outnumber Japanese air forces by ratios that rendered tactical skill advantages meaningless. By August 1943, Commander Tanaka's intelligence section was documenting American logistics capabilities that challenged basic assumptions about industrial warfare limitations. American forces were requesting supply deliveries that exceeded Japanese strategic reserves for individual operations. Construction projects at forward bases consumed materials that would support major Japanese industrial initiatives. The scale of American logistics suggested economic mobilization that transcended wartime emergency measures, representing peacetime abundance applied to military purposes. The autumn 1943 intelligence summaries contained projections that Japanese naval leadership found too devastating to distribute beyond senior command levels. American Pacific theater capabilities would exceed Japanese strategic resources by margins that made continued offensive operations mathematically impossible. Defense operations would face supply shortages that tactical brilliance couldn't overcome. The combined fleet would confront American naval construction programs that could replace entire Japanese battle lines multiple times annually. The intelligence reports flowing into Imperial Navy Headquarters painted a picture of American industrial mobilization that seemed designed to demonstrate the futility of Japanese resistance. Every Japanese sacrifice to maintain military production was being overwhelmed by American expansion that simultaneously supported global military operations while maintaining domestic prosperity. The war had become a demonstration of industrial capacity rather than military skill, with American logistics rendering Japanese tactical advantages irrelevant to strategic outcomes. Commander Tanaka's final intelligence estimate for 1943, classified documents that remained secret for 50 years, documented American logistics supremacy that transcended traditional military planning concepts. America wasn't fighting a war using industrial resources. America was conducting industrial operations that included military applications as secondary priorities. The distinction meant Japanese strategic planning faced an enemy whose logistics capabilities operated beyond conventional resource limitations, making traditional military calculations meaningless for long-term strategic projections. The winter intelligence briefings of 1944 brought Commander Tanaka face-to-face with American logistics revelations that shattered his remaining faith in Japanese strategic planning. Captain Ishida, recently reassigned from Combined Fleet Operations Planning, delivered classified assessments that documented American material superiority reaching levels that defied traditional military analysis. The Americans weren't just outproducing Japanese industry, they were creating entirely new categories of logistics abundance that rendered Japanese resource calculations obsolete. Intelligence intercepts from American Pacific Command revealed supply requisitions that seemed like administrative errors to Japanese analysts. Single American divisions requested monthly ammunition allocations exceeding Japanese Army reserves for entire campaigns. Construction battalions ordered cement deliveries that would support major Japanese infrastructure projects lasting years. Medical units requisitioned pharmaceutical supplies that exceeded Japanese civilian hospital inventories across entire prefectures. The scale of routine American military consumption challenged fundamental assumptions about wartime resource management. The transformation in American forward base capabilities documented through reconnaissance flights revealed construction speeds that Japanese engineers declared impossible without compromising structural integrity. American construction teams completed airfield projects in weeks that required months under Japanese engineering protocols. Fuel storage facilities appeared overnight using prefabricated components that Japanese industry couldn't manufacture. Barracks complexes housed thousands of personnel using standardized building techniques that eliminated traditional construction delays while maintaining quality standards exceeding Japanese military specifications. Lieutenant Colonel Sato, Tanaka's liaison with Army intelligence operations, presented comparative analysis that demonstrated American logistics operating beyond Japanese industrial comprehension. So, American supply chains delivered fresh produce to Pacific Islands thousands of miles from agricultural sources. Ice cream manufacturing equipment operated at forward bases experiencing tropical temperatures. Recreational facilities included movie theaters, libraries, and sports equipment that Japanese military doctrine considered impossible luxuries during combat operations. The American military wasn't enduring wartime hardships, they were maintaining peacetime comfort levels while conducting global warfare. The documentation of American industrial worker productivity challenged Japanese assumptions about manufacturing efficiency achieved through discipline and sacrifice. American factories operated with worker benefits that exceeded Japanese peacetime civilian standards, 8-hour shifts with overtime compensation rather than unlimited work requirements, safety equipment and medical care that protected worker health rather than accepting injury as inevitable, union representation that allowed worker complaints without disciplinary consequences. The American approach achieved productivity levels through worker welfare rather than sacrifice, contradicting Japanese industrial philosophy while delivering superior results. Intelligence reports on American railroad logistics revealed transportation capabilities that mystified Japanese analysts familiar with resource conservation requirements. American freight trains operated dedicated routes for single cargo types rather than maximizing load efficiency through mixed shipments. Entire railroad networks transported military supplies without affecting civilian commercial traffic. Rolling stock inventories included specialized cars for specific military equipment types rather than adapting available transport for multiple purposes. The redundancy and specialization suggested transportation abundance that eliminated efficiency requirements driving Japanese logistics planning. The spring 1944 assessment of American aviation logistics documented maintenance and supply operations that challenged Japanese aircraft preservation techniques developed through material scarcity. American air units replaced aircraft engines based on operating hours rather than performance degradation. Spare parts inventories exceeded immediate maintenance needs by margins Japanese logistics considered wasteful. Aircraft were retired from service for minor damage that Japanese mechanics would repair repeatedly. The casual replacement of functional equipment suggested material abundance that eliminated conservation requirements essential to Japanese aviation operations. American fuel logistics particularly amazed Japanese analysts calculating petroleum consumption rates for strategic planning. Intelligence intercepts revealed American forces consuming aviation fuel at rates exceeding Japanese strategic reserves for routine training operations. Naval units operated continuous patrols without fuel conservation measures that limited Japanese naval activity to essential missions only. Ground vehicles consumed gasoline for non-essential transportation that Japanese forces reserved for critical supply movements. The petroleum consumption rates suggested access to fuel supplies that transcended wartime scarcity limitations affecting Japanese strategic mobility. The documentation of American merchant marine expansion revealed shipbuilding capabilities that operated beyond Japanese industrial imagination. Liberty ship construction times decreased throughout 1943 as American shipyards optimized assembly line techniques borrowed from automobile manufacturing. The Kaiser shipyards achieved construction speeds that Japanese naval architects declared structurally impossible without catastrophic quality failures. Yet American merchant vessels demonstrated reliability exceeding Japanese shipbuilding standards while being produced at rates that defied traditional ni setafels within Warden. Sutomobile ni setafels within Warden. Sutomobile employers in Warden. Sutomobile. Medical logistics analysis revealed American military healthcare standards that exceeded Japanese civilian medical care during peacetime prosperity. In American military hospitals maintained pharmaceutical inventories that included experimental drugs unavailable to Japanese medical research. Surgical equipment was disposed after single use rather than sterilized for repeated applications. Blood plasma supplies supported routine medical procedures rather than being reserved for critical casualties. Dental care included cosmetic procedures that Japanese military medicine considered frivolous luxuries during wartime resource constraints. The intelligence assessment of American communication systems documented technological capabilities that challenged Japanese understanding of electronic warfare limitations. American radio networks operated with redundant systems that maintained communications despite equipment failures that would isolate Japanese units. Telephone systems connected forward bases with continental United States using cable networks that Japanese engineers considered impossible to construct and maintain across Pacific distances. Radar installations provided overlapping coverage that eliminated blind spots Japanese aircraft used for tactical advantage during early war operations. Supply chain analysis revealed American inventory management techniques that mystified Japanese logistics officers trained in precise resource calculation methods. American supply depots maintained stockpiles exceeding immediate consumption needs by margins Japanese logistics considered criminally wasteful. Automated inventory systems tracked materials using mechanical methods that eliminated human calculation errors affecting Japanese supply accuracy. Refrigeration systems preserved food supplies for extended periods rather than accepting spoilage as inevitable supply chain losses requiring constant resupply operations. The documentation of American construction equipment capabilities revealed mechanization levels that transcended Japanese industrial applications. American construction battalions operated bulldozers, cranes, and earth-moving equipment that completed projects requiring thousands of Japanese laborers working with hand tools. Mechanical mixing equipment produced concrete at rates exceeding Japanese construction capabilities using traditional mixing methods. Power generation equipment provided electricity for construction projects that Japanese engineers accomplished using manual labor techniques developed during resource scarcity periods. Intelligence intercepts from American training facilities documented military education programs that challenged Japanese assumptions about warrior development requiring years of disciplined sacrifice. American pilot training programs produced combat aviators in months using training aircraft and fuel allocations that exceeded Japanese flight training resources for entire pilot classes. Mechanical training schools taught complex equipment maintenance using practice materials and spare parts that Japanese technical education preserved for actual equipment repair needs. The winter 1944 strategic assessment compiled by Tanaka's intelligence section contained projections that Japanese Naval Command initially classified as defeatist analysis requiring disciplinary action. American logistics capabilities would support simultaneous offensive operations across multiple Pacific theater areas while maintaining European theater commitments and domestic industrial expansion. Japanese defensive operations would face supply shortages that tactical innovation couldn't overcome. Resource limitations would force operational decisions based on material availability rather than strategic necessity. American food logistics revealed agricultural productivity and distribution systems that challenged Japanese understanding of nutritional support for military operations. American military rations provided caloric content exceeding Japanese civilian food availability during peacetime abundance. Fresh meat appeared regularly in American military menus despite Pacific distances from agricultural sources. Dairy products remained available at forward bases using refrigeration and transportation systems that Japanese supply chains couldn't replicate. Recreational beverages including alcohol were distributed to combat units that Japanese military discipline prohibited during active operations. The documentation of American entertainment logistics revealed morale support systems that Japanese military philosophy considered counterproductive to warrior spirit development. American forces received regular mail delivery from family members using postal systems that maintained civilian communication networks despite global warfare requirements. Recreation equipment included musical instruments, sporting goods, and reading materials that Japanese military doctrine classified as distractions from combat readiness. Movie projectors and films provided entertainment at forward bases that Japanese commanders believed would undermine military discipline and fighting effectiveness. Intelligence analysis of American civilian industry revealed manufacturing capabilities that simultaneously supported military expansion while maintaining consumer goods production exceeding Japanese peacetime commercial output. American automobile factories converted to military production while continuing civilian vehicle manufacturing using separate production lines rather than complete industrial conversion required by Japanese wartime mobilization. Consumer appliance manufacturing continued alongside military equipment production rather than eliminating civilian products to maximize military output as Japanese industry implemented in 1941. The spring 1944 intelligence reports documented American technological development programs that operated beyond Japanese research and development capabilities constrained by material limitations. American aviation research programs tested multiple aircraft designs simultaneously using resources that Japanese development reserved for single prototype programs. Electronic equipment development included experimental systems that Japanese research abandoned due to material requirements exceeding available supplies. Medical research programs investigated treatments and procedures that Japanese medical development postponed until post-war resource availability. Financial analysis of American production revealed economic mobilization techniques that challenged Japanese understanding of resource allocation during total war mobilization. American government spending supported military expansion while maintaining civilian economic growth rather than requiring civilian sacrifice to fund military operations. Tax collection systems generated revenue through economic expansion rather than extracting maximum resources from declining economic activity as Japanese wartime finance implemented. Bond sales funded military operations through voluntary civilian investment rather than mandatory resource contributions required by Japanese war financing methods. The documentation of American logistics personnel training revealed human resource development that operated beyond Japanese military education systems designed around traditional apprenticeship methods requiring extended training periods. American logistics schools produced supply specialists in weeks using standardized curriculum and training materials rather than individual instruction requiring months per specialist. Mechanical training programs taught equipment operation using practice machines and spare parts rather than learning through actual equipment maintenance that risked damaging irreplaceable machinery. Transportation analysis revealed American logistics mobility that eliminated distance as operational constraint affecting Japanese strategic planning throughout the Pacific Theater. American supply ships operated regular schedules between continental United States and forward bases regardless of tactical situations that forced Japanese supply operations to await favorable conditions. Air transport systems delivered priority supplies using dedicated cargo aircraft rather than adapting combat aircraft for supply missions when transportation requirements exceeded available capacity. The final intelligence estimate compiled by Commander Tanaka in summer 1940 classified documents that remained sealed until Japanese archive releases in the 1990s documented American logistics supremacy that had transformed the Pacific War into a demonstration of industrial capacity rather than military skill. American forces operated with resource abundance that eliminated tactical constraints affecting Japanese operational planning. Supply limitations that governed Japanese strategic decisions had become irrelevant to American supported by industrial production that transcended wartime tactical consported by industrial production that transcended wartime. The psychological impact on Japanese command structure documented in post-war interviews with surviving officers revealed demoralization that military discipline couldn't overcome through traditional warrior spirit as it appeals. Every Japanese tactical success was overwhelmed by American material advantages that rendered individual battles meaningless to strategic outcomes. Resource conservation measures that Japanese forces implemented through supreme sacrifice were negated by American abundance that treated military consumption as routine industrial output rather than precious resources requiring careful allocation. The intelligence reports flowing into Imperial Navy Headquarters throughout 1944 painted a picture of American logistics capabilities that seemed designed to demonstrate the mathematical impossibility of Japanese strategic success. America wasn't fighting a war using industrial resources constrained by material limitations. America was conducting industrial operations that included military applications as secondary priorities supported by economic foundations capable of sustaining multiple global conflicts while expanding domestic prosperity beyond pre-war levels. Commander Tanaka's personal correspondence, discovered in family archives decades after the war's conclusion, documented his transformation from confident intelligence officer to demoralized analyst who understood that Japan faced an enemy whose logistics capabilities operated beyond conventional military planning concepts. The numbers that initially seemed like analytical errors had proven accurate assessments of American industrial capacity that transcended Japanese ability to comprehend or counter through tactical innovation or strategic brilliance. The final strategic assessment prepared for Japanese naval leadership in late 1944 maintained conclusions that high command rejected as defeatist analysis undermining military morale and fighting spirit. American logistics supremacy had rendered Japanese resistance mathematically futile regardless of tactical skill or cultural dedication. The Pacific War had become a contest between Japanese efficiency constrained by material limitations and American abundance that eliminated resource considerations from strategic calculations. Industrial capacity had proven decisive over military tradition, with logistics determining outcomes before battles were fought. The accumulated intelligence documented throughout 1943 and 1944 revealed American logistics capabilities that represented not just material superiority but philosophical differences in approaching warfare resource requirements. Japanese military culture emphasized maximum sacrifice to overcome material limitations through spiritual strength and tactical innovation. American military operations assumed abundant resource availability that eliminated conservation requirements, focusing on operational effectiveness rather than resource efficiency. The contrast had produced strategic outcomes that tactical brilliance couldn't overcome, with logistics abundance proving decisive over military tradition in determining Pacific War results. The autumn intelligence assessments of 1944 brought additional revelations that pushed Japanese strategic analysis beyond rational comprehension. Major Watanabe, recently transferred from Southeast Asian theater operations, delivered field reports documenting American logistics capabilities that operated on scales his previous combat experience couldn't have prepared us to understand. American supply operations in the Philippines weren't just supporting invasion forces, they were simultaneously constructing permanent infrastructure that exceeded pre-war colonial development while maintaining combat operations requiring massive resource consumption. The intelligence intercepts from American engineering units revealed construction projects that challenged Japanese understanding of military ability during active combat operations. American forces were building concrete airfields designed for post-war commercial aviation rather than temporary military strips sufficient for immediate tactical needs. Harbor facilities under construction exceeded Japanese peacetime port capabilities in regions where fighting continued daily. Road networks being constructed used materials and engineering standards that Japanese colonial development projects couldn't achieve during decades of peaceful occupation. Lieutenant Nakamura's analysis of American medical logistics revealed healthcare systems that transcended military necessity and approached civilian hospital standards impossible to maintain during wartime resource constraints. American field hospitals maintained surgical capabilities including complex procedures that Japanese military reserved for major hospitals in secure areas. Blood banks operated refrigeration systems requiring electrical power generation that Japanese medical units couldn't sustain during extended field operations. Pharmaceutical supplies included pain medications and antibiotics that Japanese military medicine rationed for critical cases only. The documentation of American communication systems revealed technological redundancy that eliminated single-point failures affecting Japanese military coordination when equipment damage occurred during combat operations. American radio networks operated multiple frequency options allowing continued communication despite interference that would isolate Japanese command structures from subordinate units. Telephone systems maintained backup connections using cable networks that Japanese engineers couldn't construct or maintain under combat conditions requiring constant equipment protection and repair. Intelligence reports on American recreational logistics documented morale support operations that Japanese military philosophy considered destructive to warrior discipline and combat effectiveness. American units received regular shipments of recreational reading materials including magazines, novels, and newspapers that maintained connection with civilian culture rather than focusing exclusively on military objectives. Musical instruments and sporting equipment appeared at forward bases using transportation capacity that Japanese logistics reserved for essential military supplies only. Motion picture equipment provided entertainment that Japanese commanders believed would distract from combat readiness and mission focus. The winter 1944 assessment of American aviation maintenance revealed support systems that challenged Japanese aircraft preservation techniques developed through years of material scarcity and resource conservation requirements. American air units discarded its components based on preventive maintenance schedules rather than operating equipment until actual failure forced replacement. Engine overhaul procedures used replacement parts inventories that exceeded Japanese spare parts availability for entire air groups. Aircraft modifications and upgrades continued throughout combat operations using materials and technical personnel that Japanese aviation preserved for critical repairs only. Financial intelligence analysis revealed American war funding mechanisms that operated beyond Japanese understanding of resource allocation during total mobilization requiring maximum civilian sacrifice for military success. American government spending supported military expansion through economic growth rather than extracting resources from declining civilian production as Japanese wartime finance implemented to fund military operations. Industrial conversion maintained civilian goods manufacturing while expanding military production rather than eliminating consumer products to maximize military output as Japanese industry required for adequate military supply. The documentation of American logistics personnel revealed human resource development systems that produce specialized technical knowledge faster than Japanese training methods requiring extended apprenticeship periods for complex skill development. American technical schools taught advanced maintenance procedures using practice equipment and expendable training materials rather than learning through actual military equipment that risked damaging irreplaceable machinery during instruction periods. Specialist training programs produced qualified personnel in weeks rather than months required by Japanese military education systems designed around traditional master-apprentice relationships. Supply chain intelligence documented American inventory management systems that maintained stockpiles exceeding immediate consumption requirements by margins. Japanese logistics considered criminally wasteful during resource scarcity requiring maximum conservation for strategic reserves. Automated tracking systems monitored supplies using mechanical methods that eliminated human calculation errors affecting Japanese supply accuracy when personnel exhaustion degraded mathematical precision. Quality control procedures rejected materials for minor defects that Japanese supply chains accepted rather than waste limited resources through excessive selection standards. The spring 1945 intelligence reports documented American technological development programs that continued research and innovation despite massive military production requirements that forced Japanese research activities to postpone development projects until post-war resource availability. American aviation research tested experimental aircraft designs using materials that Japanese development couldn't allocate for prototype construction during wartime resource limitations. Electronics development programs investigated radar and communication improvements that Japanese research abandoned due to material requirements exceeding available supplies for experimental projects. Transportation analysis revealed American logistics networks that eliminated geographic constraints affecting Japanese supply operations throughout the Pacific Theater where distance and weather conditions created operational limitations requiring strategic adaptation. American supply ships maintained regular delivery schedules regardless of tactical conditions that forced Japanese logistics to postpone resupply operations until favorable circumstances allowed safe transportation. Cargo aircraft provided priority delivery services using dedicated transport planes rather than converting combat aircraft for supply missions when requirements exceeded available capacity. The documentation of construction logistics revealed mechanization that completed infrastructure projects requiring thousands of Japanese laborers working with traditional hand tools and manual methods developed during resource scarcity periods. American engineering equipment operated continuously using fuel and maintenance supplies that Japanese construction preserved for essential projects only. Prefabricated building components eliminated on-site construction delays while maintaining structural standards exceeding Japanese military specifications developed for permanent installations rather than temporary facilities. Intelligence intercepts from American training operations documented military education systems that produced combat-ready personnel faster than Japanese warrior development requiring years of disciplined preparation for battlefield effectiveness. American pilot training programs used aircraft and fuel allocations that exceeded Japanese flight training resources available for entire graduating classes. Technical training schools taught equipment operation using practice materials that Japanese education preserved for actual equipment maintenance due to spare parts limitations affecting training program resource availability. Medical intelligence revealed American military healthcare that provided treatment standards exceeding Japanese civilian medical care during peacetime prosperity before wartime resource allocation reduced civilian healthcare availability. American military hospitals maintained pharmaceutical inventories including experimental drugs that Japanese medical research couldn't access due to material limitations affecting civilian and military medical development programs. Surgical procedures included operations that Japanese military medicine classified as non-essential during wartime when medical resources focused on combat casualties rather than comprehensive healthcare maintenance. The final intelligence assessment prepared Commander Tanaka in early 1945, classified documents that remained sealed for decades following Japan's surrender documented
American logistics capabilities that had rendered traditional military planning concepts obsolete through resource abundance.
Eliminating conservation requirements from strategic calculations. American forces operated without material constraints that governed Japanese operational decisions throughout the Pacific conflict. Supply limitations that determined Japanese strategic planning had become irrelevant considerations for American military operations supported by industrial capacity that treated warfare as routine manufacturing output rather than maximum national effort requiring total sacrifice. Food logistics analysis revealed American military nutrition that provided caloric content and variety exceeding Japanese civilian food availability during peacetime abundance before wartime rationing reduced domestic food supplies to survival levels. American military menus included fresh produce delivered to Pacific Islands using refrigeration and transportation systems that Japanese supply chains couldn't replicate without eliminating other essential logistics operations. Recreational beverages and luxury food items appeared regularly in American military rations while Japanese military nutrition focused on basic caloric requirements sufficient for combat operations. The psychological documentation of Japanese officer responses recorded in post-war interviews decades after hostilities concluded revealed intellectual transformation that military discipline and traditional warrior philosophy couldn't prevent through appeals to national honor and fighting spirit. Intelligence analysis that initially seemed like enemy propaganda designed for psychological warfare had proven an accurate assessment of American industrial capacity that transcended Japanese ability to comprehend through conventional military experience. Resource abundance that Japanese analysts dismissed as impossible had demonstrated economic mobilization beyond traditional wartime emergency measures representing peacetime prosperity applied to military purposes rather than maximum sacrifice for national survival. The accumulated intelligence throughout 1944 and 1945 had documented American logistics supremacy that represented fundamental differences in approaching warfare resource requirements and strategic planning methodologies. Japanese military tradition emphasized spiritual strength and tactical innovation to overcome material limitations through superior discipline and warrior dedication. American military operations assumed resource availability that eliminated conservation considerations, focusing on operational effectiveness through material abundance rather than efficiency through sacrifice. Industrial capacity had proven decisive over military culture, with logistics determining strategic outcomes before tactical engagement occurred, rendering traditional warrior virtues inadequate for modern warfare conducted through economic mobilization rather than military concentration alone. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.